Dulcinus and his wife Margaret torn limb from limb, and with them 140 others burnt for the faith at Novaria in Lombardy, AD 1308. About the year 1305, the light of the evangelical doctrine began to arise with power also on the mountains of Lombardy, called the Alps, through a pious man called Dulcinus of Novaria, and his wife, who, having accepted the orthodox faith of the Waldensian brethren, excelled most gloriously in doctrine and life, so that Dulcinus by his doctrine, and his wife by her good example, and both by their living and effective faith, opened the eyes of several others and caused them to separate from popery and follow Jesus Christ in true penitence and uprightness of life, which they did in full earnestness for the love of Jesus Christ and the salvation of their souls. But even as it was in the time of John the Baptist that many unregenerated Pharisees and Sadducees came to his baptism, so it seems also to have been here, for it appears that some who seemed to adhere to his doctrine lived at the same time in anger, revenge, and after the flesh, which, as may be presumed, grieved this good man and his wife, as also the church which he had founded, and which desired piously to adhere to the doctrine of Christ very greatly. In the meantime, about the year 1307, Pope Clement V, receiving information thereof, condemned said pious man Dulcinus and his wife Margaret as arch-heretics, and commanded them, as well as their adherents, to be exterminated. To accomplish this, many Romanists, who had marked themselves with the sign of the cross, lent their services, who charged the misdeeds of the hypocrites also upon the pious, and thus endeavored to extirpate them both together. The pious, however, with far more severe and intolerable torments than the hypocrites. Thus it happened that this pious man Dulcinus and his wife, refusing to depart from the faith, were torn limb from limb by them, burnt to ashes, and the ashes scattered to the winds. The principal members of this church, 140 in number, loving Jesus Christ, whom they had confessed more than this temporal life, were all, as they steadfastly adhered to the accepted truth, burnt alive, and thus, having commended their souls to God, offered up a living sacrifice acceptable unto God, about the year 1308. Note, these were the people of whom Leonard Krensheim has written in his chronicle, as already noted, saying, Dulcinus and Margaret founded a new sect or heresy. Thus speak the papists, alike in every respect to the Anabaptist, which continued until, etc. Touching their martyrdom, A. Melanus writes from some ancient books of history that they were first torn limb from limb, and then, as we stated above, burnt to ashes. This martyrdom, the papistic historians themselves confess, not only the men, but also the women endured very steadfastly unto death, in the city of Novaria, in Lombardy. Further observations. What P.J. Twisk has written concerning it. This year, he writes, many pious people were cruelly destroyed for their religion by order of Pope Clement V. Over 400 persons were killed by hunger, cold, and the sword. Of these, however, we do not speak here. And 140 were burned. These are the ones of whom we speak. The principal teacher of whom, together with his wife, very steadfastly endured death. Note, the reader should observe here that the said 140 martyrs who at Novaria were put to death by fire are called special followers of the doctrine of Dulcinus, are to be clearly distinguished from a certain other number of about 400 persons, who, having been surrounded on the mountain by the Pope's crusade, lost their lives by hunger, cold, and the sword, for not the latter but the former are the ones whom we would notice here. Touching their faith, according to the account of A. Melanus. Concerning their faith, A. Melanus says, from this it can be clearly inferred that Dulcinus and his wife, and many other martyrs with them, died for the true confession of the doctrine of the Waldenses, because they opposed the Pope of Rome and the Roman Church, maintaining them to be the Antichrist, and her the Babylonian whore prophesied of in John's Revelation.